the part of me that didn't value my femininity and my maternal instincts. It's like I had lost my last child. Why am I here? I don't have my children and they blame me for all their problems. So I'm the source. I had given birth to people who now don't want me. So why should I be here? But later on, I realized I had to let go. What happened was I came home and my brain told me that my children would be better off with a dead mother than a live one. So I took all the trazodone and Klonopin, like 120 Klonopin, like 60 trazodone, like 50 soma. I don't know how I lived, but this is where the soul is in charge of the body. I went upstairs and I had a hard time sleeping. That's why I was on that medication. I just couldn't sleep for years. I went right to sleep. I just let go. And what I was shown during my enlightenment in the fall is that I did that so I could dive deep into my shadow and grab what's called soul logic.
Today, I have the honor of introducing you to Kerry Blaser, a woman whose life story reads like a myth, a heroine's journey written through the shadows and resurrection. She is the author of My Inner Heroine, a book that maps her descent into the underworld through childhood, trauma, a suicide attempt, and a long climb back into wholeness. What makes her story so powerful isn't only what she survived, but how she turned her deepest wounds into her greatest medicine. We're not just going to be exploring events, but patterns and the missing elements she was born with, the archetypes that awakened her, and how the very absence of fire in her natal chart demanded that she forge her own flame. This is a story for anyone who has felt broken, who has lost their way, or who wonders if the darkness is ever survivable. Kerry's story shows us that it is, and that sometimes the soul chooses the hardest road because the fire we forge there is the most enduring. Kerry, welcome to the Consciousness Compass podcast.
Thank you. What an introduction. Wow, I needed that today. Trust the process.
I managed to read your book, which was fantastic. And I want to talk about the first chapter today. I also took a look at your chart. What I find interesting is when we look at the elements in your chart, earth, fire, water, and air, you're missing fire in your chart. This is crucial because it's both a psychological lack and a spiritual design. This is not a flaw at all. You incarnated without ready access to the archetypes of fire. That is courage, self-assertion, vitality, and confidence, because you had to forge fire through the very crucible of trauma. This is why your story has such a powerful arc of ignition from a life that nearly extinguished you to one where you carry the flame as medicine for others. Every heroine's journey begins not in triumph, but in shadow. And yours began in a landscape of childhood wounds, a father absent in presence, a mother bound by addiction, and a family system of unresolved pain. You entered a world where the element of fire was missing from your soul's original design. Astrologically, fire represents courage and vitality and the will to act. It's a spark of self-assertion and the inner sun that says, I am here, I will shine. Now, it's absent in your chart, save for a couple of planets, but to be born without it means you weren't handed a flame at birth. You had to forge it in the crucible of experience. What did that mean? That meant that life was going to push you into the underworld, into trauma, into despair, even into death's shadows, until you could find your own fire within. This is not a flaw, but a blueprint. It meant you were born without an easy ignition point. Instead, you would have to travel through darkness, through despair, through the very underworld itself in order to forge fire. This is why your childhood and early adulthood may have felt like a roller coaster of shadows, valleys of shame and guilt and CPTSD. Only through descent can you build momentum. And the absence of fire forced you to discover your flame, not as an entitlement, but as an initiation. When you look back on your childhood, what are the earliest memories of feeling like the world wasn't safe for your fire, your courage, your voice, your spark.
I so need this today. It's been a hard week. And I'm about to dive back into my childhood and see people from high school. There's just one picture that really shows how I felt my whole life. My memories of my childhood are very poor. There's a statue called Grief, and it's about a parent who's lost a child. I had just lost my inner child. The head is there, the arms are there, the legs are there, but there's nothing here. And that was me my whole life. I was born in Scottsdale, Arizona. I have an older brother who's a year and a half older. When I was 9 months old in early 1971, my dad got a job in Europe. He moved to France and Switzerland. Now, my maiden name, Blaser, is Swiss German. But France could be significant as well for some topics that we might discuss later. And I moved to Southern California when I was 5 into a very affluent town, 15 minutes from the Bachelor Mansion on a windy road. Affluent Malibu. Around there is where I grew up. I've had challenges making friends my whole life. My whole life. I had challenges inside my family. But when I started school, something happened that kindergarten year. And it might have been with who I call my original hero. I haven't spoken to him yet. I've asked, but he hasn't responded to my request to talk. The deepest connection I can tell is with him. His childhood home, he would have been at the same elementary school as me. When I was in kindergarten, he would have been in 2nd grade. I'm very vocal and my intuition is spot on. So if you want to get Kerry to reject herself, his involvement, this is what I think. And then also what I was experiencing at home, which was the same thing. Kerry's the problem. And it's very uncomfortable when my parents had unresolved childhood trauma. My dad was born in Louisiana. And then when he was like 1 or 2, my grandparents with his older brother moved to Phoenix. My grandfather started a very successful construction company in Phoenix called Mason Mart. So all the men in my family, workaholics, highly successful at work, home life, all engineers, all really smart. Can't stop them from working, but then they come home. My dad has 3 brothers. He had 2 brothers when his parents got a divorce in the 50s, which was very rare. Then my grandma got pregnant and got back with my grandpa. Is it my grandfather's son? He doesn't look like the other 3. I remember when my youngest uncle was in high school, he'd be sitting in the recliner and my grandma would feed him his food, put on his shoes, blow dry his hair. It was like codependent on a level that it's hard to replicate. Grandma was that codependent. And then my mom's family. So my grandma, my mom's mom, she got pregnant at 16. He didn't marry her. She had the birth records destroyed. My great grandmother raised my grandmother's daughter as her own. So I thought she was my aunt, but she's actually my great aunt. My grandma died in her 80s. That was her sister. And even though everyone around her knew, no one told her. My mom got engaged 4 times. That's how much of an anxious attachment style she had. And then she married my father, who was 4 years younger. And that's in the 60s. Also highly atypical. So that's what I was born to. My mom was an alcoholic and my dad's a workaholic. That was the setup for my life. And my mom initiated the divorce when I was 6, moved my brother and I into an apartment. And that taught me that I don't need a man in my daily life. If my mom doesn't need a man, then why do I? Then my dad would argue with my mom in front of me about paying child support before I was 10 years old. So I internalized that as I don't deserve to have a man to provide for me. I'm not deserving. If my dad's not going to do it, then why would anybody else? There's independent Kerry. Here I am in a very affluent town, got a job at 12 years old. Then I go to high school. High school is my original hero, Jared. I don't have a lot of memories of us interacting. I don't even know if we ever actually had a whole conversation. I don't remember one. Here's what I do remember. I was 14. I hadn't even started my period yet. I am in a very affluent town, 2,000 kids in the high school. He's ASB president. Looks like Adonis, over 6 feet tall, super smart, super good looking. Everyone likes him. He's multiple sport varsity letterman. And I'm there and I had one friend in middle school. And my one friend in middle school moved to the town I'm in now. So I basically started high school without any friends. That was my setup. Staring at me and wants to talk to me. And I'm like, just into my intuition. No, the most popular senior, and they were water polo players together. And now I know water polo players like captain the players. I found that all water polo players know, but that's been my experience. He's like best looking guy in the yearbook and everything. And with Jared, and we're in the quad, and he's, oh, I want to introduce you to Jared. He's really nice. And I'm like, are you punking me? Where's the camera? The wall of fear came over me and I left. And I was like a rock. Jared was trying to get to me. A couple weeks later in the quad, Jared allowed another freshman girl to bring him a picnic lunch. And if women are being honest, picnic is claiming a man. But there's my wound. I had a wound that I only found when I was 53, and I'm 55 now, that I'm replaceable. So that's my soul showing me that I have a wound, that I'm replaceable. And everything happened between us, and I pushed him away. I got a job right after that. This guy who's super into me, he doesn't hold space for me. I'm 14 and he's the most popular. I have no friends really. And you're going to go to somebody else. But that's been my whole life. And so what I have to acknowledge now, looking back, is I was in my masculine, protecting myself. And masculinity plans, strategizes, stays consistent, right? Femininity is emotional in different places all the time. Why was I consistent and why was he emotional? Okay, that was me and my masculine. That's him and his feminine. And that was the setup for a lot of the men in my life, especially the men in my book were a lot like that. And when that started, I repressed him. I didn't think about him. At times I'd remember, oh yeah, he used to stare at me. Maybe that's why these guys like me. But I didn't acknowledge until last fall how profoundly he had impacted me.
You have an emotional antenna turned up full volume, but without the element of fire, it meant you didn't have natural defenses. So you felt everything, but you couldn't yet push back. Psychologically, that's a recipe for deep empathy, but also for feeling overwhelmed and unsafe in your own skin. When fire is missing, the psyche often compensates in one of two ways: by over relying on other elements or by attracting outer circumstances that force fire to awaken. For you, the over reliance was on water. Water gives you sensitivity, depth, empathy, but it also meant you were vulnerable to drowning in emotion, to being carried by ancestral tides. So life then brought you the second path, the outer fire through confrontation, the people who became emotional sledgehammers in your life, the traumas that cracked your defenses, and the suicide that broke you. These were fire bearers. They carried the flames you lacked, often burning you with them until that fire could ignite from within. Psychologically, this is what Carl Jung calls enantiodromia. It's Greek. It means the way an extreme state flips into its opposite. Your lack of fire drew in extremes of conflict, shame, and powerlessness until you could invert them into self-assertion, resilience, and courage. This is why your wounds and your suicide attempt were not tragedies, they were initiations. Okay? Now, you've got the wound of fire because your chart shows Chiron, the wounded hero, placed in Aries. Funnily enough, it's a fire sign, the sign of fire and courage. This suggests your greatest wound would be around self-worth, self-assertion, and claiming space. But it's also the place where your greatest medicine would eventually come. In mythology, Chiron teaches us that the wound is where the gift hides, but you had to be broken in the place of fire to become a carrier of fire for others.
The wisdom is hidden in the wound. That's what I discovered.
So you had to be broken. You had to be opened up by the fire you didn't think you had in order to discover that the flame was inside you all along. You descended into your own wound and lived it. It's also the archetype of the mystic. You're the one who sees that death is not the end, but a passage to wisdom. I was reading about your mother's visitation on your birthday after her death and the channeling and the psych ward. When I read that, I thought these were not accidents. These were thresholds. The underworld gifted you second sight because you'd walked its corridors and returned. Can you describe how the inability to feel safe in your own power played out in your younger years before your healing journey began?
The signs and synchronicities I've been shown about myself, about who I may have been in history and who Jared may have been in history, are profound. Thinking along those lines, I know that in the 1970s, it wasn't time for self-healing yet. When the Mayan calendar ended, this time cycle ended in 2012. The new time cycle is this time cycle of self-healing, where before you went to someone else for healing, like codependent healing, where now it's time for our own healing. Project 2025 that we hear so many ways, I'm also part of that. I took on all of these wounds and all of these archetypes so that in 2024, I could experience enlightenment more than 10 times and turn all of these wounds into wisdom, connect with the whole collective and help, but also unearthing what is healthy femininity and holding women accountable for their toxicity and contributing to the patriarchy. Like all my signs and synchronicities point to that my soul was Mary Magdalene and Jared's soul was Jesus. Now, I haven't talked to him in 40 years. And I'm facing all of this alone. I have my first book signing this weekend, but I know that right now I'm like going back into my high school. The book signing, of course, is at a romance in women's literature bookstore to show me myself, right? So I could describe my book as a love story about how I fell in love with myself and remembered my love for my original hero from my childhood. After facing all of my wounds that I know I had from Jared, about the deepest wounds, I had already rejected myself so much at 14 that I remember him in high school. It would be hard for me to think that there wasn't some other event that happened when I was younger around the same time as my parents' divorce, maybe a catalyst for the divorce.
I know this is sensitive, but when I was reading about your suicide attempt, I look at these things symbolically because
Yeah.
every underworld journey has a breaking point. There's a
Yeah.
symbolic death before rebirth. And I
Yeah.
think it came through your suicide attempt because on the
Mm-hmm.
surface, it looked like the end of your story. The
Mm-hmm.
deeper pattern, it was an initiation. Now,
Yeah.
without the element of fire in your chart, the psyche often feels extinguished, unable to fight, unable to keep burning. But
Mm-hmm.
symbolically, your attempt at death was also the moment when the ember of your own flame was finally struck. When you reflect on that moment, the tunnel of darkness, the swallowing of pills, what part of you wanted to die and what part of you was still holding on?
Of course, we could go the other way, but I'm just talking generalities because the wisdom helps us with our relationship with ourselves and our relationship with others. Relationships, it's women's work. Connection is women's work. Men deal with things, knowledge. You notice there's tons of global studies that men are naturally attracted to things and women are naturally attracted to relationships. This is what it is. Gosh, now where was I going? You got me all emotional. I keep losing my train of thought.
I was asking you about reflecting on that moment, that
Oh,
tunnel of
yeah.
darkness, and what part of you wanted to die and what part of you was still holding on.
The soul logic coming through goes along with Mary Magdalene. I'll get into the signs and synchronicities of Mary Magdalene right now because it's so important for me. I have a master's degree in East Asian religious studies. I didn't study Western religion. My parents didn't raise me in church. Sure, I've been to church. We celebrated Christmas, but it wasn't like I knew about Jesus's life. I've heard of Mary Magdalene, but I didn't remember Jared's last name until last November, and his initials are JC. And my birthday is June 25th, which is the exact opposite of December 25th, masculine, feminine. The past 4 years, I've been hearing that I'm on a Jesus council. I'm like, Jesus council, what does that mean? What do you mean, Jesus? What? Like the apostles? Like, I kept going. I'm alone. Like, I never went on a date with any of the men in my book. I just go to yoga and come home. Then in the fall, after I reached out to Jared, and he read my text, but his soul opened to me. I started talking to his soul, but I haven't talked to him. What came through pretty quickly was I'm an agent of God. I'm like, agent of God? Is that a soul? What do you mean agent of God? I didn't look it up. I kept going because like in and out of enlightenment, it was like gnarly. I was told in the fall that agents of God hide things to be found in a later life. In the past couple months, stuff started coming up more about Jesus. I'm like, did Jesus have a wife? So I Googled, did Jesus have a wife? Oh, Mary Magdalene. Some videos started coming up on YouTube. I started watching videos about Mary Magdalene, and there's a Gospel of Mary that was found in 1897. Then more texts were found in 1947. The early Christians didn't want a church. She was a priestess. What is she now? Downloading wisdom. He's the Son of God. Peter was jealous of Mary and Jesus's relationship. She was the last one there at the crucifixion. She was the first one there at the resurrection. She was pregnant with his kid. All this stuff came up about how at the Council of Nicaea in the 4th century, when they created Christianity, it wasn't the time for self-healing yet. And why do you go to a man for forgiveness when forgiveness is feminine? Why are you separating men from their wives and taking that control into the church? Why are we teaching that there's punishment? If I were to kill someone today, that would be me acting from a wound. It's not like there's a hell. There's just so many questions that came up. And so I'm trying to accept myself and go, this is the fire that I'm igniting. You have to take on an equal amount of wounds to get an equal amount of wisdom. If you want to get to the top of Mount Everest in terms of wisdom, you got to go as deep as Mount Everest as an initiation to get there. It is what it is, all based on the laws of physics. So this is all what I have. I took on so many wounds. I almost died when my older daughter, right after she was born, because I didn't value my ability to create human life, went right back to work in January, and she's a fire sign. My brother's a fire sign. Tim in the book is a fire sign. Just a Sag. Tim and Andrew Tate, Sages. Now, the first firefighter is a Capricorn. Very grounding. I needed a lot of grounding after Justin and Andrew. I joke in the book, this fire engineer who teaches urban search and rescue, decorated, right? Firefighter of the year. I needed so much help that when I dialed spiritual 911, this is the firefighter that was sent to me. And it was right after Andrew had been canceled on social media. Jared got his current job, head of global security at an international company that deals with the internet. He got that job 1 month before I reached out to Justin, and Andrew had internet censorship going on, and his payment processing center was canceled. I'm like, who's powerful enough to do that? Oh, the FBI might be powerful enough to do that. So yeah, if you think that my soul had to plan to create a wound deep enough for me to unearth fire hot enough for me to come out and say that I think my soul might be Mary Magdalene's soul and that Jared might be Jesus. I'm alone at home. I have my older daughter, my younger daughter who has eating disorder. This one, she's not talking to you right now, but my son's doing good. This is the most valuable art in the house because he doesn't create art. So he gets to be at the top, and he is the oldest, and that's my older daughter. Soul logic basically shows we don't need religion because our souls, if everyone can learn to listen to their hearts, download wisdom and knowledge, and understand that church is control, outside control, because we don't understand that we're souls having a human experience and that all the wisdom is built into us not to murder and not to rape and not to do these things that we don't want in society. And the only reason we're doing those things is because we have wounds. But to quote Carl Jung, without the thorn in the flesh, how do we grow? So we're here to grow. We're here for self-improvement opportunities. We're here to learn to surf the waves of life. And that's also substantiated by the laws of physics. So the going up and down in our energy is how we make energy move and fluctuate. And the faster it moves and fluctuate, the higher vibrating we are. So the more hills and valleys you can move through in your life, the higher you can vibrate. People like want to avoid the challenges, where diving into the challenges is really where you unearth more parts of yourself and you love more parts of yourself and you vibrate higher. I had to learn that. And the past 6 years is really where I learned those lessons, because right after I attempted suicide, I did 4 medicine journeys. And the first one, I was able to see that I chose my children. Thousands of souls had lined up. And then the next one, I could see that I didn't love myself. I came home and asked my son, do you love yourself? He's no. Do you feel my love? He's no. I'm like, okay, every day I'm going to start asking you, what can I do today so that you feel my love? And we went on like that for a year. My son knew, like we all know, we're just so messed up. We didn't know how to fix it. So I figured out how to fix it.
And it's those ups and downs that generate momentum. It allows us to accelerate and move faster overall. There's a principle in physics that mirrors the journey of healing and spiritual growth, because life is not a straight path. It's filled with highs and lows. It's filled with unmarshaled turbulence. It's filled with moments of ease and periods of struggle. While a smooth, predictable road may seem ideal, it is the challenges, the emotional valleys, and the breakthroughs that create momentum and inertia for faster personal transformation. We see this in shamanism. Healing's not a
Yeah.
linear process. Just like the roller coaster track, it requires moving through the depths of pain and uncertainty to gain the energy needed for true elevation. I see that every emotional low serves a purpose and builds the momentum necessary to propel us to higher states of consciousness and personal power. The deeper ones descends into the valley of darkness. And the more propulsion one gains to ascend to the next mountaintop, physicists have proven that humans have energy bodies or souls that are constantly connected and conversing with each other, forming our collective consciousness. Now, you have your north node, your soul's compass is in Pisces. That
Mm,
means your destiny is not about control or perfection. It is
mm,
about surrender,
mhm,
compassion, and spiritual connection. It's no accident that in your darkest moment, after reading your book, is what pulled you back from that attempt was love, the gaze of your daughter, the connection to souls beyond the world. Your chart says to me you don't survive by fighting harder, you survive by surrendering to love. And this is where your missing fire has forced you to learn courage, not in theory, but in blood, in
yeah.
tears, in confrontation with annihilation. And this is why your story resonates. You did not have the luxury of an inherited flame. You had to kindle your own. And that ignition birthed two archetypes within you: one, the wounded healer who transforms wounds into medicine, and the mystic who learns that life and death, shadow and light are not opposites, but harmonics of the same song. So from this foundation, you began to rise, not by erasing the shadow, but by integrating it, not by bypassing the underworld, but by carrying its wisdom back into the world. After your attempt, I sensed something began to shift. You realized your voice mattered. Even in a psych ward, in the place of deepest disempowerment, when you spoke up, people listened. That was fire finally sparking awake inside of you. It's striking that you only have two fire placements. If you want the references, Venus in Leo and Chiron in Aries. These both describe love and wound. Love
Mm,
is where you find your flame, and wound is where you forge it. What
yeah.
was the first moment after your attempt that you felt your own fire returning, not someone else's, not survival, but yours?
When I woke up, my older daughter found me Friday morning and then came to visit me in the hospital. And right when she walked in and came to my face, I turned and my eyes opened, looking right into her eyes, and we had the same green eyes. They had invited me. I remember asking the nurses to help me because I had made it. And I'm asking for help now because I don't want to fall down. And I don't want to slip in the shower and break my leg like I'm doing it now. And in the book, that's when I found the self-belief. My mom passed away on my 45th birthday. On that day, my intuition told me it's time to accept your psychic gifts and heal from your childhood trauma. I was the matriarch of the family. Now everyone's in my heart, but I had to learn to surf the waves of life. I had to learn to go into my emotions and trust what I found and saw. It was slow. Like I'd get wisdom, like once every couple months, I'd get a new piece of wisdom. It wasn't like coming at me like it does now. First, I couldn't apologize to my younger daughter. And I asked myself, why can't I apologize? And myself told me, you feel that if you apologize, the people you love will leave you. I'm like, that doesn't make any sense. If I apologize, aren't they going to want to stay? So there's the wound, the inverted wisdom. And that's what I realized too. I'm like, wounds are inverted wisdom. When we're wounded, we care for other people first and ourselves last. The love hierarchy says, self-love first, community love last, so that you always pour from a healthy cup of love. This is where I learned the inverted wisdom, like you've talked about. But where is it located? In the wound. So you got to have the bravery to go in the wound to get the wisdom. Something else that came out in the past couple months is Woman of Valor. Woman of Valor is biblical Hebrew, Eshet Halil, and my ex-husband's Israeli, but I don't know biblical Hebrew. I've lived in Israel. My kids are half Israeli. The past few years, I've felt super connected to his great-grandfather, who was the top Sephardic rabbi in Haifa, which is the main city in the north of Israel. And I always felt like I'm going deep into the text, the wisdom with the rabbi. And I was thinking, the women are downloading the wisdom and the men are writing it down. Just because the woman's name isn't on the text, we thought the women weren't involved. Or was it a family thing? I think there's just so many ways that we perceive women in the past, which isn't true. We're so busy blaming men for patriarchy. Women were the emotional center, and men went out and did emotionally unbalanced things. So why weren't they doing their job? No one's asking that question. Everybody's, oh, poor women, because they scream loud enough. I'm here to say, no, but it takes a woman to call out other women on this front. Also, I'm a mom, and I introduced myself like that on my website. I'm a mother, I'm a shaman, I'm an author. Motherhood means something. We're 20 years from population collapse, and one of the things I'm doing is standing up to red pill. Well, what is red pill? One man, multiple women? That's the way it is right now. We're 20 years from population collapse, so that ain't working out. I had to build the fire in me because now I got children to protect. So all those wounds set me up for all that wisdom and helped me understand the wisdom that even the box of emotional pain he left me with was a gift. The gift is the process of learning to turn the wounds into wisdom.
In alchemy, there's a process where it's burning down the ash so the gold can be revealed. And psychologically, it's the moment when self-hate burns itself out and a tiny flame of self-worth, or what I would call soul esteem, emerges. You didn't inherit fire, you became the blacksmith who forged it out of the shadow. These archetypes I mentioned are not ideas. They live in your bones. They shape your relationships, your work, your calling. When did you first realize that your wound wasn't just pain, but was also the beginning of your purpose?
One moment I can point to is in the psych ward. I guess that was a real moment where I was really like, can I call it pinky toe healing, where I went through all the layers, all the onions, all the way down, and I've integrated the wisdom fully into my pinky toe. I would say it was that moment. I was like, oh, I'm a healer, but I'm in a psych ward and I just attempted suicide. How am I going to do that? How's that going to work out? Like, how am I going to make that case? So once I learned to work through a situation with my children, like my first enlightenment experience, they thought I had a manic episode. Mom, you need to be locked up. Which, okay, I understand. I'm not saying that from their perspective. They had legitimate concerns. It's because it's so abnormal. It's not normalized in society. It's not normalized that enlightenment is part of a human's natural emotional range. Buddhists have taken over it. Oh, it's ours. Like, you're a bunch of men who've left women claiming an emotion. Oh, there's some problems over there. And I've lived in Chinese Buddhist monasteries, and my main professor, Dr. Alan Grippard, who has since passed from France, taught a lot about how Buddhist monks have anal sex with young boys. In Buddhism isn't acknowledging that the woman is the emotional center, that enlightenment is an emotion, and that men process their emotions when their woman has processed her emotions. So if I were to come back and think that, okay, I'm going to show up in Jared's life and he's perfect, maybe he is, I haven't talked to him, right? Then he's not my guy. Is that he can only heal after I've healed. Because if I'm the center and I'm out, then he's way out. I have to adjust myself to give him a chance to come back into alignment. Women don't know how to retain men, hence men go for breadth and not depth with one woman. They're like, get me out of here, avoid, because the emotional center doesn't know what she's doing. I didn't know what I was doing. I think women need to learn that we didn't know what we were doing as the emotional center, and we're learning, just like the men are learning. They do the left brain, and we got to do the right brain to stay emotionally balanced and hormonally balanced. There's a lot that I can bring to light because I brought my own light. I took my light into the darkness. And like the first hero, I told him, one of the first texts I sent him, that I'm here to shine light on his darkness and I won't leave him behind, and I keep my promises. I'm very loyal. I'm the year of the dog in Chinese medicine. So I'm very loyal. I don't go here and go there. I kind of stick to the path. And I told myself, you don't change courses in the dark. Stay the course, the light will come. And it brought me to the light.
Your chart is a map of harmonics. At first, your life was a single tone,
Mm,
survival, shame, struggle, but your descent into the underworld turned that tone into a chord, suffering, surrender, survival. And slowly that chord became a harmonic,
mm,
resonating outward, healing for others. And that's how missing fire becomes a found flame, not as a gift given, but as a song created.
mm,
The first chapter of your story, I don't see this as an autobiography. It is the
mm,
myth of a heroine who was
mm,
designed without fire so she could forge it within. And it was someone who was given the shadows that she could turn them into light, who descended into death so that she could return as a healer, a mystic, a guide. Your origin story, your suicide attempt, and your recovery, I don't see those as broken fragments. They're the foundation of your soul's medicine. Part one of your story is not about being broken, it's about being initiated. Because
yeah,
you were born without fire, so you could learn how to forge it, you were broken so you could become the agency of amplification for that medicine. So you descended into death so you could return as a guide. This is the foundation of your heroine's journey.
I descended into death so I could learn appreciation for life.
This is part one. We're going to do a series.
Yeah. I'm going to cry a lot. You got me cry.
Hey, it shows you're moved.
Yeah.
Where can people find you? And do you have any pause continuation words?
www.kerryblaser.com. There's a link to buy my book. There's a link to scheduling sessions with me. I also have a free 2-hour session for all first responders and military, and then 50% off my services for them. There's 2 Fire Academy instructors in my book, and there's a current mental health crisis. And I'm helping in that front. And parting words, trust the process. Success is a balance between action and surrender. Femininity is surrender, and masculinity is action. So, women, it's our job to surrender. Men, it's your job to act. Surrender comes first. Woman submits, the man decides. All relationships start with the feminine. There's more wisdom that comes out in the book along that front, but yeah, starts with the feminine.
I'm reminded your journey through despair is not the end, it's the crucible. The missing element in your life, the fire, I don't see that as a curse. I think it's a contract. It's a design. It's something your soul signed up for so you could embody flame as medicine, not only for yourself, but for others and for those yet to come. I want to thank you for your honesty and for delving into what can be sensitive parts of your life where you could be triggered into reactivity. It's relevant to your story. And I'm sure there are many others out there who have gone through a similar path, but maybe alone and in despair.
Yeah, oh, for sure. I think a lot of women are in pain, but this is where women, we're unearthing our value. We're exploring our value, and we're in the darkness right now because we are 20 years from population collapse. But we're going to bring all that to light and get us back into balance between men and women because we're here to heal the wound. This is what came through so strong. And the wisdom that came through is how masculine and feminine souls are created. So it's the intent to create the masculine creates the feminine soul, and the feminine soul tears out half of her heart to create the masculine soul. And I know something is true when I see it in multiple places. So women are source energy. I'm source energy. I create, I channel human life and I give birth, and he's once removed from source energy. Women's nervous systems are more robust than men's nervous systems, evidenced by a higher male infant mortality rate. When you do testing of nerves on women versus men, you have a turn of the volume on women way higher than men. If you gave men what you give women, men would just throw up. We have to acknowledge that women have a more robust nervous system because we channel life force energy and we can give birth, and we're competing with men to have a job in a corporate office. Women do not know how to value themselves. And that's what I'm here to model as well. What is healthy femininity? What does it look like? I'm a woman of valor. I'm courageous, brave, and resilient. What does that mean to be a mother? And we've had this wisdom because when we deny religion, woman of valor, Eshet Halil, must be gone.
And this is just the beginning. What comes to me is no heroine rises alone.
I didn't get here alone. It's hard, but I have to be grateful for all the people who treated me poorly and showed me myself, but it's really hard. That's what I'm facing now because I'm going back into high school. It's like this week. Going back into high school. It's like, oh my gosh, that's the lesson.
The next chapter of your journey unfolds through relationship, through a man named Tim, who appeared not as a rescuer, but as a mirror. I would like to explore with you how love itself became the teacher and how heartbreak can act as an initiation and how intimacy cracks us open to the parts of ourselves we never knew were waiting to be met. And I think this is the mirror you didn't know you needed. And it's where we can explore the sacred lover as an archetype and how your fire was not only forged in solitude, but also in the alchemy of love.